we have to transform our leadership. If we want to have exponential impact, we have to transform our leadership.
For too long, entrepreneurs and business owners have been told they have to choose between profit and purpose. If you're tired of burning out, done chasing someone else's version of success, and ready to grow with more purpose, prosperity, and peace of mind, you're in the right place. Because every business has the potential to do good and do well. I'm Chase Friedman, and this is In Pursuit of Purpose, where strategy meets soul. Today's guest is someone whose life and leadership embody purpose in action. This conversation is about how leaders rise, rebuild, and realign in the face of adversity. Born in Somalia and raised as a refugee after fleeing civil war, Hamse Warfa rebuilt his life from the ground up. It's a journey that reshaped his lifelong commitment to inclusion, equity, and systemic change. He is now the CEO of World Savvy, a national education nonprofit preparing young people to thrive in this complex, rapidly changing world. He previously served as senior advisor at the U.S. Department of State under President Biden and was Minnesota's Deputy Commissioner for Economic Development. He was the highest-ranking Somali American official in the state's history. He is also, yes, there's more, the co-founder of BankU, a blockchain-powered fintech platform that expands economic access for people excluded from the global economy. So from displacement to diplomacy to tech to entrepreneurship, Hamse's journey is a powerful example of resilience, identity, and purpose in action. Hamse, it is a pleasure to see you again, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you, Chase. It's really my pleasure to join.
I know you've got a lot going on in your world, and I want to try to cover as many bases as we possibly can. But for me, one of the most inspiring things working with you and knowing you as a sort of a peer and a friend is your origin story, your backstory. To me, it's one of the most inspiring stories of leadership and impact. And I want the audience to kind of get a little framing for that. Take me back. Was there a certain moment, a certain time in your life as a kid where you first thought, I want to make a difference in the world. I want to see change. I want to be able to be that leader, that voice that changes not only circumstances for myself, but you have children, for your children, for future generations. Was there a moment or a series of events that gave you that clarity that I know now drives you today?
Yeah, thanks, Chase. Grateful for your work and really just elevating the power of purpose with profit. I think most often what happens is, as you highlighted a number of times in the past, is people think these are two distinct things. So really grateful to just join you today and have this conversation. So for me, it started kind of lived experience of my own shaped what I do now. My understanding of purpose, was really shaped early on. As you know, I grew up in Somalia. I was born in Somalia, experienced the civil war. Not just myself, but my grandfather was displaced by war. My father was displaced by war. I was displaced by war. But at young age, my father passed away when I was around 10, 11. But what I remember from my father is that he used to pray for me and his children that we might be useful to society. And at the time, I didn't really fully understand what it meant to be useful to society. Experiencing political violence and civil war, spending 3.5 years in refugee camps in Kenya, that lived experience of displacement, civil war, shaped, my purpose and thinking about my role in the world and what is my responsibility. And so I think it's through that experience, that moment in which I can say, number one, really shaped, my own thinking. The second is that at the age of 12, it might have been 11, I might have been 11 years old, I joined a group of young people who wanted to stop the war. So here you have a bunch of kids trying to confront the government and the opposition group who were shooting at each other, and with signs of peace and stop the war and we want to go to school. At that time, I didn't realize what I was doing was exercising leadership, and that it was leadership in action. But those two are the two moments that come to mind.
And you've held many positions, both public and private sector, over the years. When did it become evident to you, whether it was from that leadership group or your lived experiences, that impact and purpose, as you've shared, can be really amplified and have a greater platform through things like entrepreneurship and business leadership, in public service, all of which you have worn those roles.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see those platforms as your way of amplifying the impact that you want to have in the world?
Yeah, it really comes back to the why, right? And I think for me, I was very fortunate that I was able to uh, live in my why, both as a lived experience, but also what I do in work, right? And that, um, when my two co-founders and I started BankU, a software company that uses blockchain technology, it was about the purpose, because giving access to the global economy for folks who have been economically excluded and they have been subject of the global economy. In other words, the Starbucks coffee that, I had this morning, for example, or that, kind of soda came from somewhere, but those who were in that supply chain are not visible in our global economy. And so to me, it's about human dignity and the fact that, the women farmer in the Congo, who I can, trace back my coffee to, and thinking about, her dignity and the fact that she deserves to have credit history. She deserves to be on the global economy and have a transaction based, because life is about collection of events and activities, making sure that, we're empowering women, immigrants, people who have often been excluded from the global economy. But what about if I'm able to do that while also thinking about a sustainable business model that is software as a service that helps big brands find their last mile, transparency and traceability, meet ESG requirements. And so it is win-win. It's about profit, it's about business, it's about purpose, it's also about impact. And I would never want to be positioned into picking one over the other. They all kind of exist, which is what we have done historically, right? Is that, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, I want to go into business. What do you want to do when you grow up? I want to work just for NGO. No, I want to make money, as though those things are distinct and separate. They don't have to be. In fact, this is why we're experiencing a significant societal challenge, is that because of this silo approach to how we live, how we work, and how we show up in our economy.
You've just articulated the exact thesis of this entire show, and better than I ever have. But I appreciate you sharing that, because you're right; they are not mutually exclusive. You can do good and do well, and you are a testament to that. And you've done it at every level of your career, whether it's through BankU and or working for the government under the Biden administration. This sort of first season I have dedicated to a theory of belief. I do believe that we have been stuck in this sort of silo, or this sort of cultural teaching, especially in Western society, where we are taught and told it has to be one or the other, that they are binary choices, right? It's either all purpose and, bleeding heart nonprofit and 501c3, and a lot of times it struggles to make money and have the impact they intend. And on the other path, profit at all costs, bottom line at all costs. When in fact, you can have this beautiful balance, as you've just shown, that does good for the world, feels good. I would imagine
Absolutely.
You are literally living that purpose, and can be a sustainable and scalable business model. This concept of creating shared value, right? Where the business can be more accountable to every stakeholder at every point in the value chain. And by investing back in those communities, or, the farmers that are growing, coffee beans for Starbucks, right? Cyclically, investing in those sorts of people, you're not only obviously building brand equity, but you're building sort of the next generation of potential workforce and advocates and customers and all of these different things. So given that this theme is around belief, and clearly you live and breathe that, what would you say to those that are still stuck in that sort of that paradigm of I have to choose one path over the other. How do we break free and rewire our belief system to get more people, whether it's our generation or our children, to see the pathway to achieving both in their lifetimes?
Yeah, well, first of all, you really played an instrumental role in helping me clarify my why, and through the process that you created for folks like me to even with the certainty of my purpose and why, it's always going to require trusted partners who you go through with to, number one, hold you accountable, but number two, to reframe, clarify what your purpose is. And I think most often the role of the guide, the coach, the person who kind of helps, a leader, whether we talk about young people, as you know, I'm the CEO of World Savvy now, an organization that is empowering young people to really develop the global mindset and the disposition and behaviors and skills to be successful in life, community, and career. It comes down to developing this belief system or rediscovering, because most often I think it already exists. It is just a matter of finding the right partner or trusted guide who helps you find, the purpose and why you don't need to pick one over the other. I think the second piece that I want to lift up is that the world is complex. And I think embracing complexity, especially in this era of AI and, this technological advancements, and recognizing that, yes, technology changes, but it's really the people, right? How do we change along with it as people, right? And when I say this, I'm not talking about just AI. I'm talking about this purpose and profit combination should be rooted in what has been proven historically, which is when we center empathy, when we center purpose, when we center, humility, these things anchor transformation along with technological changes that are taking place. And through that mindset is what allow you to see it is not either or. It's not either for, just thinking about making money or making an impact. It's and both, right? So thinking about both as a modus operandi is, I think, what we should all be teaching, right, in schools, in our, as we think about leadership development across organizations, because there's tendency to say, what, these issues might be thorny issues. Let's not talk about, because when you talk about purpose, it might lead us to think, it might get us into politics. It might get us. So there seems to be a tendency sometimes to move away, especially in mid-sized to large corporations.
Well, I mean, I think you're bearing the lead. This is exactly the work that you're doing at World Savvy right now, right? I mean, you're the CEO of a wonderful global nonprofit organization that I think is helping do exactly that, groom future leaders in a more complex world and society, equipping students and youth with the critical thinking skills that I think are going by the wayside when it comes to AI and automation.
Yeah, critical thinking. Sorry to cut you off. Critical thinking. This says I'm passionate about this topic. So critical thinking, ability to hold, multiple perspectives, thinking about collaboration. Guess what? These are the things we need now, like we needed yesterday, right? And if we are going to survive, for the foreseeable future, it's really coming down to how we prepare our young people and move away from, you can go to the most prestigious, universities and this and that, but if you are not anchored in this mindset of asset-based critical thinking skills, collaboration, empathy, our society is going to struggle a lot, and the societal challenges we have now are going to be 10 times more.
I think what's wonderful about your journey is that you've approached this from top down, working with and coaching and guiding leaders through your sort of transformational leadership kind of paradigm, through books, through keynotes, through consulting. and bottom up, right? Now from the educational system, from youth. As you said, I think a little bit easier to shape the future when you can instill these values, critical thinking capabilities of belief in you can achieve both, right, in this world. But it's going to take time and we need it now. It is urgently needed now. So what do you feel is the biggest challenge you faced when guiding leaders, those leaders that are currently in places of power, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector? You know, you've worked obviously under the Biden administration. What have you seen as one of the greatest challenges to reshaping belief, right, within leadership of what could be possible, sort of getting them off of that drug of profit and bottom line at all costs? What is that greatest challenge, and where do you see as sort of the remedy or antidote that we need to have more of in our leadership?
Yeah, I think the first one is, when I was appointed by President Biden as a senior advisor to the U.S. State Department, I moved to Washington, D.C., very excited to help implement the vision of the new administration. And, I was at the office of the Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights. But in it, we really engaged private sector, civil society. Basically, we reimagined how human rights should be redefined and who should be sitting at the table, right, as opposed to in the past where you have government to government, and we work with a bunch of activists, and right. The fact that I remember coming to Denver, Colorado with Secretary Blinken and then Secretary Zay at the time, where we engaged the private sector because this was also about their prosperity. When you think about workforce development, and that, in the case of, I'm based in Minnesota now, as you know, and the next 10 years, the demographic population change that the state's going through is indicating that 70% of our population growth will come from communities of color.
Wow.
And so if you are a business and you're thinking about workforce, your future workforce or your workforce of the moment, but you're not thinking about the impact, the social impacts, and how folks like me, who came to this country, not speaking language, not, of course, few bad words of English, but other than that, no, not knowing the language, right? It's how do you think about workforce training and community empowerment and consider the community as a superpower, not only to make money, but to also improve the safety, security, and the prosperity of the communities in which you operate in. And so I think to get there, it's going to require us to have a mindset shift. Our minds have to shift from, I'll use the education system, right, as an example. Our education system was built for the industrial era. It was built with, memorization, standardization, testing. But young people are inheriting now a world where that requires adaptability, uncertainty, right? And it requires, almost 60% of kindergartners and first graders of today will inherit jobs that don't even exist yet. They will be asked to solve problems that we don't even know yet, right? And so if you are an employer that is thinking about the profit margin, and you're not thinking about the education system, you're not thinking about the workforce, you're not thinking about this inclusivity of our communities that is a lot different than it might have been in the past. When I became the head of workforce development for the state of Minnesota, I used to share, a story about how I didn't know where Minnesota was in 1994. And here I am leading the state's system, the workforce system, and the policies that we had in place that was developed in 1980s. Yet, as I mentioned, when you have 70% of population coming from new communities, like new immigrant population who are, empowering our economy, in our civic culture, how do you think about those things? Not in a silo approach, but more comprehensively. It's going to require a mindset shift.
Yeah, no, I think it reminds me of, there's there's this Einstein quote, right? If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and the right question to be asked, and 5 minutes solving it.
Well,
And
amazing.
I think what you said there is the jobs, the challenges that we foresee coming, we don't know what those are. We can't define those yet. Everything is rapidly evolving. And so a bit more time spent convening, to your point, diversity of thought, different stakeholders that look and sound different from perhaps sort of the traditional powers that be, to contemplate on what those questions and challenges could be, right? We race to kind of try to solve everything, the symptom, but we're not getting to the root of the challenge. As you have navigated public sector as an entrepreneur and running businesses, to private sector within the state and federal government, and now in a nonprofit 501c3, you've had perspectives from all angles. What do you feel is needed from each, or perhaps all of them collectively, to address or to at least consider some of these unknown or unsolved, challenges around where we're going, how we sort of create a better future, focused on impact and purpose? What do you see as each role or the strengths of each different type of entity to address those?
Yeah, so I think the first one is, it might sound too simplistic, but I think repeating it often is going to require alignment, is going to create rather alignment, which is no single sector can solve problems on their own. So if we are moving from that assumption, then how do we better collaborate to solve complex problems that are affecting all of us? And what I see often is, systems that are influenced or built from a historical, structural, structures that in some cases were meant to be exclusive of a lot of people. Sure. So how can we come to recognition that, yes, these systems, like when I went to the State Department, you can only imagine one of the first few high Somali American to be appointed by an American president, which is both an honor, but also hugely responsibility, right? How do you move systems that have been around so long, that were built in some cases to be exclusive of so many people? The cafeteria of the U.S. State Department is renamed after an African-American ambassador who was refused to have lunch at the cafeteria. We have institutions that, as recent as mid-90s had job performance review questions that was about how well your spouse, partner cooked food for guests, and things like that. And I'm talking about like as recent as like mid-90s, right? Wow. So as we think about, what each sector needs, I think the collective we and the power of the collective we is going to require each to examine their own history, their own, whether it's in the nonprofit sector, philanthropy, private sector, or government. I think private sector is now more in recognition that for their own bottom line, a lot of government policies are going to impact what they do and how they do. And so building and strengthening relationship with government becomes critical. Also with nonprofits and activists, right? A small group of energized protesters can really present significant challenge. I'm based here in the Twin Cities, and as you know, Target is just going through massive challenges because of some policies and decisions made by the company. Yeah. And so I think what's going to require is this recognition that we all need to change, and we need to rethink how we lead. To me, it comes down to John Maxwell, one of my mentors. Everything rises or falls on leadership. And I would take a step even further into say, we need to transform our leadership for greater impact. And when I say greater impact, I'm talking about thinking multiple bottom lines, not just one bottom line.
Triple bottom line, or even beyond.
Beyond,
right?
really, yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
we're not going to get into politics, but given there are many forces that are occurring in our country and around the world right now that are seemingly in opposition of the type of purpose and impact and inclusivity and equity that we're talking about. How do you get up every day and go to work and continue to try to lead and guide and be an example for others, for students, for your own kids, in the face of a world that is increasingly skeptic of purpose as a means for growth and responsibility, whether it's culturally or in business? How do you continue to find that resilience and resolve to keep pushing forward each day?
Yeah, Chase, I'm gonna be frank to say there are some mornings where I just feel like it's too much. It's really too much, where I don't feel as inspired, to get up and get to work. But those days are very limited compared to the days where I remind myself that each one of us is not obligated to finish the work, right? But we are obligated to do our parts. And the work will never be done if we don't do our parts. And so if I don't get up, if I don't show up, if I don't really get to work amidst, the massive challenge and, the barriers that we are experiencing as a society and community and individually in some cases, then the work will never be done. So I think I continue to remind myself that, well, I will be the missing link for that success to happen. And I hate to be the missing link. And I want to make sure that I am showing up, I'm doing my part, and that I'm not obligated to finish the work of building, in the context of the United States, a country that lives to its ideals. And that, my responsibility is to get us closer to our ideals, knowing that it might not even arrive in my lifetime or my children's lifetime. But the responsibility on me is to continue carrying the same way that the previous generations got us, where we are. If it wasn't the sacrifices of the civil rights movement, leaders and others, I may not have been in a position to be White House appointee, come to the U.S. State Department, or becoming the highest African official in Minnesota state government, or the CEO of, and these are, and it's not about the position, right? One thing about leadership that I often emphasize, it's not about the leadership role you're in. Leadership is not positional. I'm stating the obvious, but it's always good to write. It's about what is this season of leadership, and what is the impact that you can have to carry this work forward. And so, Chase, I think that's how I look at it, is, am I doing my part? And I think if I don't get up and if I don't show up, I feel enormous failure on my parts to do that. So I'm getting up 4 a.m. every morning, my friend, still.
I know you are. I know you are. Look, I think you've just stated the mission is bigger than you. It's bigger than any one person, right? Whether that's doing the level of work that you're in, or for an entrepreneur running a small business. I think that is something that we've talked about on this show. It's much of the inspiration for why I wanted to have these conversations, having dealt with my own versions of burnout and malaise and seeking purpose in life and what am I meant to be doing. And I know a lot of other founders and business owners and even just employees working for a company wrestle with that every day. How do you self-motivate to kind of get up and do just to do the job, right? Or to lead others in their jobs. But when you can connect it to a higher belief, a mission, a purpose that is bigger than just you, I think that is the ultimate sort of pull statement, right? The ultimate sort of motivating and inspiring, reason to believe. And that's where we talk about purpose and purpose statements and all these sorts of things. But having that sort of North Star can be incredibly energizing for those, if for nothing else, the days where it feels insurmountable, the days where there's a hope gap, where you feel like we're not getting anywhere, we're not making any progress, everything around us seems like it's crumbling or burning. I think that is why every person, especially every business leader, needs to have that compelling purpose and understanding that is bigger than just themselves to continue to sort of internally motivate intrinsically, and then also for whichever organization you are leading. So again, that's a call to anybody out there at any stage of the game is reconnecting with that sort of higher objective, that higher mission.
Yeah, Jason, I think, what you just said reminds me of is, that sometimes organizations and institutions, most organizations, I would even say, would say, we are a purpose-driven company. We are purpose-driven organization, right? And then, so I think, as I think about that, the question is, are you using purpose as a brand? Is it about the brand? Is it a message? Or is it a philosophy? Is it a practice? How do you show purpose in action? Right. And I think that's an area where, to go back to your earlier question about what can we do, particularly in the private sector, I would say more so than the government and civil society. Authenticity, like how do you make sure that your purpose is not being viewed as this branding exercise checklist BS that you're doing.
Checklist and purpose washing, greenwashing.
Greenwashing.
Yeah, you're right. And it's something that I like to kind of examine constantly it's easy to sort of talk the talk. It's easy to kind of put it on the masthead, something that sounds good and maybe even feels good. But how are you living up to that expectation every single day? How are the systems and strategies in place aligning with that? How are you walking the talk?
Yeah.
And again, not an easy thing to do when we are, and you've seen large corporations, not to call them out again, but like Target, like many other brands that have really sort of done a pivot or a 180 from their intended purpose or stated purpose when things get difficult, right? Whether it's through government or business bottom line, political, systemic challenges occur, how steadfast and resilient are you in the face of adversity to continue to double down on those values and double down on that purpose versus just jumping ship the moment things are uncomfortable, right? You
Exactly.
have a few that are still kind of hanging on, like a Costco, for example, that has come out and stated, no, we believe that diversity is one of our greatest strengths, business strengths as a company, right? So again, what would you say to the skeptics out there, the leaders that maybe give an eye roll or think of it as purpose is fluff, or no, we have it posted on our website? What do you say to these folks to energize them to not only commit to action, but to stay the course when things get difficult?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose is most needed when in moments of crisis. And we have seen this through COVID. We have seen, it's amazing. I was, leading the workforce system. So when we had unemployment insurance benefits, came up prior to the COVID, like even 6 months prior to that, we wanted to make tweak changes to the policies within unemployment insurance of the state. And we were having a hard time because, as you know, these are very complex. There's so many stakeholders and, business community, chambers, nonprofits, governments, unions, you name it, right? And then, COVID hits. And all of a sudden, we found a way to really make the system more purpose-driven. We removed 1939 law that prohibited young people, students, from getting unemployment insurance, even though they contribute to it. And so I think, yeah, exactly. So I think, I want to say those are the times you test, the credibility of organizations is how they show up in moments of crisis. That shows whether purpose was more of a marketing material and branding, or it was really, really a purpose, right? The other way I look at it, as you know, in my best-selling book, I'm bad in self-marketing my book. So, but I think the only
I'll market it for you. It's an absolutely brilliant book. You have two, and you have a documentary coming out. So
thank you.
We're going to let everybody know where to read that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that, the reason I mentioned is that I intentionally called 12 practices for transformational leadership because they have to be practice, not just a principle, not just a philosophy. And what practice means is that it has to show up in whichever category in your, For governor of Minnesota, my former boss used to say, budget is a moral document. It says a lot.
Sure.
And so I think for me, if I want to check, whether organization is authentically embracing purpose in their work, I want to look at your leadership development budget. And I want to see if leadership development trainings are these half-day leadership training, check off, all done, right? All my managers have been trained on psychological safety and wellness and leadership. I want to see the continuum, and I want to see the type of content of leadership training that your teams, whether it's mid-level managers or executives, like what kind of leadership do they go through?
Yeah.
Is integrity rooted in that? Is inclusion rooted in that? Is empathy rooted in that? When you think about dignity of teams, are these leadership practices that you see a continuum of, organization's work? Or is it something that you do 2 times a year or 1 time, every March we do this thing and then we're done, right? And so I think, like, how do we live and breathe purpose as we strive to make profit as a company? And how do we invest in our people so that they are all transformational leaders who are connected to their communities, who know their communities are superpower, community as a superpower rather, and bringing that to work rather than when you come to work, you put your purpose, your everything, you leave that at home, you come because here you're just making money and the company's just making money. No, you don't have to do that. In fact, your ROI as a company would be significantly enhanced when you have purpose-driven leaders at your
Greater
organizations.
Productivity, collaboration, innovation, less, higher rates of engagement, less employee churn. And this is what people are seeking. People are seeking. They don't want to have to hang up values before they leave the house, go mentally and soulfully check out at a job and then come back to it. I mean, so many are doing that, but imagine if they can connect what they believe and their values through the work that they do and ultimately do a much greater job for that company and be an ambassador for the company. And to your point, yes, it'll absolutely show up in ROI. Regards to accountability, if you're not measuring it, it doesn't really matter, right? So whether it's in the budget, whether it's in reporting and analytics, and we've spoken to, my friend Sienna Jackson, we had her on, and she does a lot of strategy, impact strategy and measurement. So the tools are out there, but again, taking a step back, I can understand how that can be daunting and intimidating, right? Because there's a lot of fear around, well, if we commit to it and measure it and it doesn't quite pan out or we don't see it through, who's going to be accountable? I think one of the things that we need to continue to stress that each of these initiatives that we're talking about don't have to be world changing or world saving in scale out of the gate, because that's too much for anyone to try to handle. But it reminds me of, James Clear, Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
If you can build small micro commitments and micro habits that lead you on that course, it's much more approachable, it's much more measurable and sustainable because they are habitual to business practices and business actions and budgetary, inclusions versus trying to sort of flip a switch. So I think we all need to just think small before we think big, take that first step. For me, I'm constantly trying to analyze where else there can be a difference and avoid that paralysis of, how can I change all these things that I see as injustices in the world? But each of us have our own superpower, like you just shared, and our place in the greater effort to try to be that change. But if we're not stepping up to the table, we're not in the game, if we're not in the arena, then we can be the weak link.
Absolutely. Chase, well, you reminded me of what I consider a recurring challenge early in my career, which was really... I often, I was kind of afraid bringing my own complex identity to institutions because I saw them as liability, right? And it wasn't until probably when I was in my mid-career working in philanthropy, where I kind of felt, like the burden that I was putting on myself, trying to not bring my complex identity, right? Immigrant, Muslim, Black, refugee, American, Somali, suburban, father, right? Like so many different identities, all that are part of who I am.
Yeah.
And I remember I wrote this even in my book. There was a time where I used to be afraid of public speaking because I was like, oh, I have an accent and people are going to react to my accent. It wasn't until mid-career I realized these are actually assets to these are strengths.
Yes.
These are the unique things that I'm bringing in to the organization and to the institutions that I join. I don't need to hide them. I need the institutions to recognize me and my complex identities, because when I come to an organization that I believe values who I am, my passion, my work, my life, when they're all in sync and I see them as a system, I bet that organization is going to benefit so much more than if I'm coming to work stressed and trying to not bring parts of me to the organization, right? So I think this is a piece where I think, I don't know how much institutions think about proactively creating that space where people feel it's a safe and brave space for people to bring their creativity and talent to advance the mission of any organization or any company.
Use your superpowers. Amen. Let me ask you this, and I want to sort of wrap up, and I want to end on a positive and a high note, right? We want to continue to kind of look at where we can be. What does success mean to you in this season of your life?
I want to say, really, given the, I'm thinking about our country at this moment. I'm thinking about the polarization. I'm thinking about the political violence. That I live in Minnesota, as you know. There were tragic political violence that took place. Where former Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives, a good friend of mine, was killed, and her husband. And I'm really thinking about the power of neighbors and communities coming together. I'm thinking about how we have solutions, almost all of the solutions to our problems. And I really, truly believe so. I really believe we have what we need. What keeps me positive is also recognizing the energy, the positivity, the power of young people and what they would do, not just for themselves, but for all of us. I think, to me, success is about thinking our community as a superpower, as I said, and thinking about that we need each other. And that, regardless of what sector or what work you're most passionate about, success is about collaboration. And we need that now more than ever before.
Beautiful. Amen. And I couldn't agree more. It feels like we are so far divided, and yet when we really truly dig down deep, there's so much similarity. There's so much we have in common that we are not really necessarily led to believe by what we see or what we read around us, but the power of community, ground up sort of governance, as we've talked about, is an incredible power that we have versus looking to perhaps some elected officials to kind of save the day. We have the power within us. We have the superpowers around us in mass.
Yeah. And this is coming from someone who, works at the federal government and an executive branch of government, right? That federal service, I mean, it's important, institution and level. But like I said, federal level success is dependent on community level success. And so the power that we have as individuals in our communities is so, so powerful, man. And let's use it.
We are very fortunate. I mean, given from where you've come from, your lived experiences, I'm sure it's only magnified the opportunity that we have before us living in this country. All right. So my wrap up, my final question that I like to ask everybody, sort of the denouement, right? And I think you've already answered it in a million different ways in this conversation. But what do you believe is your purpose?
Yeah, it's really, like I said, it's really guiding leaders to think transformative impact. This moment, I think maybe the way I want to frame, I know you're asking me to make it very short, but I think I want to think about how my career and life has have been evolving, right? Which is there were times where I was, the hero. So I'm always expected to solve problems, whether it's in my family, in the community, in the broader, civil society and government. As I went through, and thanks to many friends, including you and others who really helped shape and refine, we have to transform our leadership. If we want to have exponential impact, we have to transform our leadership. So my purpose is to help guide leaders transform their leadership for a better world, better organizations, and a more prosperous society. That is why I get up every single morning. That's really what excites me. Moving from kind of the hero to coach, the guide,
to the guide, yeah,
to the
sure.
guide. And so I see my purpose as a guide for transformational leadership to have exponential impact.
Bigger than just one of us individually,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well said, sir. Thank you very much for opening up, for sharing, for getting up every day, even the hard days, when it feels like the world is against you or us, but for dedicating your life and your purpose to making this a better world, a better community.
Actually, Chase, and I'm so grateful to spend time with you, and thank you for the work you do. You had a big impact in helping me become a better leader and a better guide who help other leaders.
Well, it's my pleasure to be even a small piece of that. And for those who want to continue to follow your work, would you mind sharing where they can sort of follow, reach out to you, what they can read? Here's the book plug right here.
Yeah, so hamsewarfa.com, HAMSEWARFA.com. And there is a link to sign up for my newsletter, and would be grateful to connect folks with.
I love it. We'll put all the information in the show notes so you can kind of follow Hamse's career. But once again, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure and an honor. I appreciate you tuning in today. I hope this brought you a bit of confidence, clarity, and conviction on your business journey. If something here resonated, do me a favor, leave a quick review or share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. It goes a long way in helping more people find the show and start their own journey. And as always, you'll find all the resources and ways to connect with me in the show notes. Now, go take that next step in building the business you've been dreaming of. Wishing you continued purpose, prosperity, and peace of mind.